The Spill Sports Show. Matt Reynoldson.
I've always been told I have the face for radio, and now I'm making it happen.
David Eichelt.
It's utter blasphemy. It blows my mind.
Scott Ayers.
The next time they make the playoffs, I'll be running for president.
Spend your Thursday drive time with the Spill Sports Show. Every week from 3 to 5 on KRNU.
Bring them out, bring them out, bring them out, bring them out. It's hard to yell when the barrel's in your mouth. Come on.
You're listening to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU.
Just gotta do what I gotta do, and when I gotta do it, you know. So basically, just doing what I gotta do every time I step on the court and do what I gotta do.
Now, your drive time entertainment. Matt Reynoldson, David Eichelt, and Scott Ayers.
Thumpity thump thump thumpity thump, look at Frosty go. Thumpity thump thump thumpity thump, over the hills of snow.
It's that week, folks. It's coaching search week. It's silly week of the coaching carousel in college football. And here to break it all down on a Thursday afternoon, the Spill Sports Show, your home for sports talk on KRNU2 and occasionally 90.3 KRNU, wherever we decide to be on each given week. We'd like to welcome you in to Studio 2 in Andersen Hall on the University of Nebraska campus. I'm Matt Reynoldson alongside Scott Ayers and Jake Bartecki, guest hosting with us today for a little Frost talk, as all the speculation right now is that Scott Frost, the Central Florida head coach and former quarterback of the Nebraska football team of the last national championship winning Husker football team, will be the head coach come Sunday afternoon. And Scott, sharing a name with the guy I know is very special to you as you point to the sky here in the studio. But Scott Frost, obviously the clear choice to be Nebraska's next head coach, and what a great hire that would be after a very crazy coaching carousel this week.
Oh, yeah, I mean, and the Huskers have to be thankful they're not in a similar situation that Tennessee is in, and I'm sure we will talk about that a little bit later on in the show. But to really mark down their guy and Scott Frost right away, I think was huge for Nebraska. Now, the big thing is that they can actually rely and trust Scott Frost, not bail on him after just 3 years like they did with Mike Riley. And I'm not saying the firing of Mike Riley was wrong, but you have to give a coach some time, and time is what Scott Frost will need because this program will not change overnight. The team might go 6-6, 7-5 if they're lucky next season, and that might be good enough for Husker fans. It might not be, but at the end of the day, Scott Frost needs time to turn this program around.
Yeah, and I sort of agree with Scott over there, who, as you said, Matt, shares the name with the legend Scott Frost. But yeah, I mean, Mike Riley only really had 3 seasons to work with this team, and Nebraska historically is one of the best programs in college football. When you look back in history, it's probably you think of Notre Dame and Michigan, Ohio State, Miami, and Nebraska probably is the top 5 big college football schools. And I think knowing that Frost is a Nebraska boy, he was a quarterback here, I think that Husker fans are going to be a lot more lenient with giving him time to develop this team. And I think he'll be really good for Tanner Lee as long as Tanner Lee sticks around. Scott Frost was a quarterback. And, I mean, put Tanner Lee with a coach who really knows quarterbacks and knows offense, and I think we could be pretty good in these next couple seasons.
Absolutely. Scott Frost, the last national championship winning quarterback for the Cornhuskers. A little different offense back then, more of the option style. Mike Riley, known for developing quarterbacks, but had a little trouble with Tanner Lee this year. But, we might see Tanner Lee in the NFL next year, so who knows? And I don't think we can move forward really in this conversation without discussing that coach, Mike Riley.
Let's go. Let's get it cranked up.
Who just departed over the weekend, was fired on Saturday morning by athletic director Bill Moose. And like you said, Jake got 3 years to get it done, but he reiterated over and over again this year that it felt like a year one. They had a total overhaul of the offensive system, total overhaul of the defensive system, and had he known that he was only going to get 3 years, do you think he would have done that, Scott?
Oh, absolutely not, and I think the hiring of Bob Diaco actually might have been the kiss of death for Mike Riley because Diaco insisted on this 3-4 defensive scheme, and it turned out to be a nightmare for Nebraska. Cornerbacks playing 10 yards off of wide receivers, easy pickings for any offense all season long. I believe there were 4 players when they played against Nebraska were named Big Ten Offensive Players of the Week, and that just shows you the defense that Nebraska tried to install the season, and it was a complete nightmare.
Yeah.
Jake?
Okay, so last February, I came in here for a journalism school tour, and I came in and sat in with the show with you guys, and you were talking about Bob Diaco. And you're saying that this was the week, it was the week that they hired him. It was like mid-February last year. Mm-hmm. And I said, coming from UConn, going to the Big Ten, it's going to be tough, and I don't think he's going to develop the defense, one of the worst defenses the Huskies have seen all year. And I think if Scott Frost comes in, you're going to see a lot of different defense. And I said it last year. I didn't think Bob Diaco was right for the job just because he doesn't have experience with the Big Ten.
Certainly, and we'll talk a little bit later in the show about the 3-4 and how that transition may stay with a possible new defensive coordinator in Eric Shenander, who Scott Frost, if he is hired, would bring from Central Florida. But yeah, Jake, you props on the prediction, definitely.
Thank you.
Bob Diaco had experience as a GA in the Big Ten, had experience playing in the Big Ten, but like you mentioned, coaching in the Big Ten,
yeah.
Right, was not a defensive coordinator. Was at Cincinnati, was at Notre Dame, and then went to be the head coach of UConn. And I've heard this a lot, that I don't know if he was necessarily emotionally ready to come back. I think he was very hurt and irked by what happened at UConn, a little bit defensive, and they were pretty nasty to him up there in New England, and it was kind of tough sledding for Bob Diaco up there, only 3 seasons up coaching the Huskies, and people made fun of him for trying to create a rivalry with none other than UCF, and a lot of different things happened that really led to the demise of Bob Diaco. You couple that with the passing of Bob Elliott, the safeties coach and one of Diaco's mentors throughout his coaching career, and it was very tough sledding for Diaco all the way through.
It was, and never really gained any momentum throughout the season with his defense. The best performance maybe against Illinois when they allowed 6 points, and that's not saying much considering the Fighting Illini were one of the worst teams in the Big Ten, if not the worst team in the Big Ten Conference this year. So, you feel bad because Diaco was successful at Cincinnati and Notre Dame, defensively speaking, but, his tenure at UConn was bad, but some might say the tenure here at Nebraska in just 1 year could be just as bad.
Yeah, I just think when you mentioned it, Scott, the Huskers' defense this year, you're talking about their best performances being against Rutgers, 17 points allowed. And 10 I actually think was the number because Tanner Lee threw a pick 6 in that game. 6 against Illinois and 24 against Purdue. That's what they should be allowing against those teams. If you want to win, you can't be allowing 50-plus points to Minnesota. You can't let them run for 400 yards. You can't let Ohio State score 56 points on you. If the Huskers want to be back to what they were in the 90s, that's not the so-called black shirt defense.
And you look at a turning point of the season, and I think that was that Northwestern game when he felt let down by the offense and the special teams in that game in which the Huskers lost 31-24 at home to Northwestern in overtime. And Diaco had some things to say in the post-game press conference, in which we all made fun of him for, do you see the strain? That's where that quote came from, and everything involving that with the mess surrounding Bob Diaco. He felt let down by the offense and the special teams in that game, and then the defense tanked from then on out, allowing 50-plus points in the Huskers' final 4 games, or final 3 games. Yeah, 3 games. Yeah, final 3 games in really just abysmal defensive performances. They never recovered from seeing the strain, for lack of a better term.
And what a flip-flop, too, it was. Going from complaining that an offense can't score. And to be fair, Nebraska's offense, they did score 44 points in that Penn State game, but I mean, two of those touchdowns came late, Matt. We were on the call. You were on the field, and, you texted me after the game, oh, gosh, they scored 2 tutties. And I said, you bet they did. And so those
you got a couple good calls.
They covered the spread, baby, and I was happy about it. But offensively and defensively, it was bad at the end of the year. And to give up 54 points against Minnesota, I mean, the Nebraska defense looked like they had never played against a read option before. When they played Ohio State, JT Barrett just at will just moved the football, and so the defense had to go, and that starts with Bob Diaco.
Yeah, and those last 3 games where there were 50 points allowed, Minnesota did not need to drop 54 points and 409 rushing yards on us. I mean, that's just that shouldn't be happening to any team in the Big Ten. I think most Big Ten defenses are better than allowing 400 rushing yards to Minnesota of all teams. That's what Ohio State dropping 400 rushing yards would be incredible. And then, okay, Penn State, they have a pretty good offense. Saquon Barkley's really good. Chase McSorley can throw the ball. But probably could have kept them under 50 if we knew how to tackle. And, Iowa, that's another team. Why are we allowing 50 points to them when we hold them to 14 in the first half?
Certainly a struggle for Nebraska down the stretch. And like you mentioned, that first half against Iowa, things were looking up. Looked like they were going to send Mike Riley out on a win. But alas, they did not, which led us to Bill Moose's Saturday press conference and the firing of Mike Riley.
Always been a John Deere guy.
Not what he said during the press conference, but what he said during his introductory press conference, or at least a side session on his introductory press conference. That's athletic director Bill Moose. And he actually led off his press conference with saying, the last time I was in this room, I was talking about whether I was a John Deere guy or not. Seems like about 5 years ago. So Bill Moose opening with some humor and then getting right down to business and firing Mike Riley for lack of progress on the field. And a lot of what he said was eye-opening because he mentioned a lot of organizational things. He did a full scope of the football program before deciding to fire Mike Riley, and that included things like making the locker room dirty, players doing different things with their uniforms. Bill Moose is a stickler about that. He was a football guy. He's a real football guy, and was an offensive lineman for Washington State in the 1970s. So he's big on the uniformity. He's big on the little things, the cleanliness of the locker rooms, and the discipline, and that's not what he saw going forward through the program, which kind of brings us back to that original philosophy that some of the naysayer fans had at the beginning of Mike Riley's tenure. Is he too nice of a guy to lead a program like Nebraska?
Mm-hmm. And, that will be an argument forever against Mike Riley. But I still think at the end of the day, he did bring some good changes as well. I think, I was actually listening to a radio show here in KRNU about Bo Pelini and how a couple of guys were saying that Bo Pelini should have stayed, and I disagree with that. I think Bo Pelini needed to go, and I think Mike Riley needed to go. But during his tenure, he did give a more positive atmosphere in this locker room, and I think that is crucial moving forward, that whoever the next coach may be, I think Mike Riley is going to give a type of, personality check for these players that they're willing to play for other coaches, because when Bo Pelini's guys saw Bo leave, they did not want to play for Coach Riley.
Yeah, and I think going back to what you said, Matt, is Mike Riley too nice of a coach? I think he wasn't hard enough on them because he couldn't get them out of a slump. They had a bad season his first year and then really couldn't get them out of a slump at all when they went 5-7. They ended up winning their bowl game that year against UCLA. But then you look at the next season, start off 7-0, and then they lose 2 games. One they probably should have won against Wisconsin on the road. I remember I was at my girlfriend's homecoming for that game, and then the next game they get blown out 62-0 by Ohio State and had one win the rest of the season, which was Minnesota. He couldn't get them out of a slump. You know what I mean? And so I don't know if it's he was too nice. I think it was more he just couldn't get them out of a slump. I mean, that's what I honestly think.
It's hard. We look for things to look at in retrospect as we move forward with the differences, as we're seeing as media members, as fans, as Nebraska going through different things. We look at what went wrong in the Mike Riley era, as Matt Reynoldson, Scott Ayers, and Jake Bartecki right here on the Spill Sports Show Thursday afternoon on KRNU, looking at things that went wrong in the Mike Riley era, and a big thing was discipline. You look at that 2015 Miami game when they went down to Miami. Heard reports of some of the players going out the night before that game in Miami. That there was no curfew because Mike Riley wanted to enforce this stigma or enforce an ideal within the program that these are young men, treat them like young men and let them make their own decisions. Well, maybe some disciplinarian coaches, not to the toxic effect of Bo Pelini when it went to us versus the fans, as he did with the players, but the lack of disciplinarian effect might have caused some things to slip, and it all really came crashing down this year in a 4-8 season.
Yeah, and when you hear those kind of reports, it's not a good sign because on one end, you try to understand with what Mike Riley was doing, allowing these young men to make decisions. However, when they start making mistakes of going out and partying and doing whatever it is that they're doing, that's when you have to make some disciplinary actions. And I don't think Mike Riley was ever able to do that here in his 3 years at Nebraska. And, his first season was tough because, as I said before, some of those guys just did not want to play for Coach Riley, and that can be very difficult to get those guys motivated for games. But his tenure here was short, and there were times early on in the season, Matt, I know you and I talked that we thought maybe he should have an extra year, but how the season ended and, with crucial losses against NIU and Northwestern, his tenure had to be over.
Yeah, and about the Orlando scenario, I think I sort of see why Mike Riley didn't let them have a curfew because, Scott, you mentioned it, some of those guys didn't want to play for him. Maybe he thought, well, if I let them go out and do their own thing, maybe they'll respect me a bit more. But there's got to be some sort of disciplinary action. When guys go out, there's no curfew, they're out late, and then they can't perform when there's a game, that's an issue. And I think Scott Frost is going to be a little tougher on these guys, and I think even though a lot of these guys over the course of the years have come to like Mike Riley, and a lot of them were sad when they had to let him go, I think Scott Frost is going to get a lot more respect than more combined than Bo Pelini and Mike Riley got out of the Husker players.
Absolutely, and we will look forward to seeing that announcement coming up on Sunday, whether it is Scott Frost or somebody else at the helm of the Huskers for the new head football coach of the University of Nebraska. Well, Nebraska is not the only school looking for a coach. Tennessee is still looking for a coach. Florida, Texas A&M, and many others are involved in a crazy coaching carousel, one of the craziest I have ever seen in my lifetime. We'll talk about that a little bit coming up next, and the craziest coaching carousel I think I've ever seen. We'll break it all down for you coming up next, right here on the Spill Sports Show. Stay with us.
Whether college graduation is in a few months or in a few years, gaining hands-on experience in your field of interest is a must. While a college degree is a fruitful step towards acquiring a top-tier career, today's employers are looking for college grads that already have some experience under their belt. Here at Husker HireLink, we're here to ensure that you're the person they're looking for. By simply uploading your current resume and skills, we can connect you with hundreds of employers seeking to hire college students to fill their intern, part-time, and full-time positions. Log on to HuskerHireLink.com today to get started.
The risk of an American man developing cancer in his lifetime is a little less than 1 in 2. The risk of an American woman developing cancer in her lifetime is a little more than 1 in 3. But the death rates of cancer have been declining in men and women since the early 1990s.
I relay for the support of my sister.
I relay for the support of my grandfather.
I relay for the support of my uncle.
Keep helping those in need by participating in Relay for Life. Join us for Relay for Life at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln each year to fight back against cancer. Sign up for your community event or donate at relayforlife.org.
Air, fundamental to all living things, and it's all thanks to trees. Not only do trees supply oxygen, they also provide homes to wildlife, filter water, and let's not forget their natural beauty. But the trees need your help. The Nebraska Arbor Day Foundation is doing their part to revitalize forests across the country, and you can help. Donate to the Nebraska Arbor Day Foundation today by visiting www.arborday.org. Be that breath of fresh air and ensure forests live on for future generations.
What are you still doing with all those old t-shirts that don't even fit anymore? Why not get rid of them by donating them to Goodwill of Lincoln? Goodwill of Lincoln is a not-for-profit organization that takes nearly any household item and item of clothing. Its main mission is willing workers employed and community resources maximized. Goodwill also provides a safe environment for people with mental, physical, and emotional disabilities to be employed. So what are you still doing with those t-shirts? Your freshman 15 is less noticeable in a slightly bigger shirt anyway. Donate the small ones to Goodwill of Lincoln. To contact Goodwill of Lincoln, go to lincolngoodwill.org.
How to be a great dad in 15 seconds. Bike ride, go fish, walk in the park, phone call, milkshake, play catch, picnic, fly a kite, tell jokes, laugh, talk, read a story, tell a story, bumper car, swing set, bowling, pillow fight, cut loose, stay tight. Whew. Because the smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today. Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Hey, what's up? Holla at ya, boy. XOXOXO. You getting these texts? Question mark. Where are you? What are you doing? OMG, you are making me mad. You better text me back. I'm waiting outside your house.
Relentless, aggressive texting is like sending an angry robot to deliver your message. When does the robot become dangerous? Let us know at that'snotcool.com.
That'snotcool.com.
Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Back here in Andersen Hall on another Thursday afternoon. Matt Reynoldson, Scott Ayers, Jake Bartecki sitting in for David Eicholt while he's getting his back fixed at the chiropractor.
Sorry, David.
Little personal information about you there. Said he woke up with some pain after my back-breakingly savage replies to his tweets last night during the Husker basketball game.
Good,
I'm still blocked. He blocked me still.
I've yet to get blocked by anyone at this school on any social media, and I'm pretty proud of that.
Say one thing to David, and you'll be on that list pretty quick. No, we love David. We hope we get him back for the second hour. But right now, Jake Bartecki sitting in for him as we discuss this wild coaching carousel, one of the craziest of my lifetime. Everything going down pretty much all in the SEC, it seems. SEC, UCLA, and Nebraska seem to be the main culprits for this coaching search. Florida State looks to maybe be involved soon. And then that little school up in the corner that used to employ Mike Riley, Oregon State, is just a mess right up there. Have they hired a coach yet, Scott? I have no idea. They really started their coaching search very early when Gary Anderson resigned, left $12 million on the table because he just didn't want to coach at Oregon State.
Yeah, well,
it's just the worst job in Power 5. It's so easily.
Listen to this. Jonathan Smith has been will be the next Beavers head coach.
All right.
So how about that?
So John Smith, that seems like a convenient alias.
Yeah.
Do we know this guy exists?
Well, here's the thing. It says Oregon State hired Smith, 38.
Do we know the source exists?
On Wednesday as the 17th.
It's 38. Wednesday.
Suspicious. He's the 17th head coach in program history. But he was a running back in the day.
Scott, you got to cite your source on this.
Yeah, cite your source.
The Oregonian.
The Oregonian. Say that 5 times.
And he's got a nice little Washington jacket on, so he's going to bring glory back to Oregon State. I think he's going to go 4-8 next year.
Okay, I need you to cross-search cross-search the stock photos for that exact picture of the guy wearing the Washington jacket.
Yeah.
Washington.
Matt, we know this guy's legit. Oregon Live, Jonathan Smith introduced as Oregon State Beavers head coach. So now you know it's legit because I confirmed it, not Scott.
Yeah, see, John Smith, though, I mean, I don't really buy that. Do I have reason to be skeptical? I'd really just think that the Beaver mascot is going to coach Oregon State.
Here's the thing.
And probably going to do a better job than both Mike Riley and Gary Anderson at Oregon State.
We've all played the game The Sims, I'm guessing, and the name that you'd make for your character is John Smith. So,
exactly, right?
I don't believe it either.
So on to the real coaching searches. Florida scooped up Dan Mullen. That was relatively quiet. It was their 4th option, which was rather humorous to see. Florida starting their head coaching search very early after firing Jim McElwain following 2 SEC East titles, and from what Florida said, were made-up death threats. So they tried to fire him for cause, doing things with a lot of integrity down there in Gainesville. Dan Mullen, the new head coach of the Florida Gators, their 4th option following Chip Kelly, Scott Frost, Mike Gundy. They offered the job to all 3 of those before Dan Mullen, former offensive coordinator under Urban Meyer, worked with Tim Tebow, and then went to be the head coach at Mississippi State, coming back to Florida. Pretty good fit there, I think.
I think so, too, and I think they made the right hire. Dan Mullen, he turned a guy like Dak Prescott into now an NFL stud, and I think that's what Florida needs. They've been struggling at that quarterback position. They've been struggling just in general, so Florida hitting the nail on the head with this hire right here, and one of the SEC schools that actually got it right with a hire.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Scott. Dan Mullen's a good coach. I mean, he's a really good coach. He's had some really good teams at Mississippi State, and I think this is going to be a little awkward because I think Mississippi State and Florida, they're going to have to play each other in a few years. Next couple seasons, I think. I haven't checked the SEC schedules. I'm not Mississippi State's schedule the next 3 years isn't my top priority, but I think that's going to be odd because that's going to be a rivalry.
Yeah, Mississippi State got to number 1 under Dan Mullen
With
at
Dak
one point
Prescott.
with Dak Prescott. He's just been a very good coach for them, and he's bringing his defensive coordinator, Todd Grantham, with him to Florida. So he was a hot name for defensive coordinator jobs across the country, but he will be going to Florida with Dan Mullen. The only really thing I know about Todd Grantham is that he called a safety blitz on 3rd and 15 that lost the game against Alabama, so I have my own thoughts on that. But Todd Grantham going to be the new defensive coordinator at Florida. Florida locks up their guy. UCLA with the splash hire of the offseason, locking up Chip Kelly, beating out Florida. And that was when the laughing stock at Florida really started, when they had Chip Kelly in the palm of their hands, and UCLA says, nope. UCLA, a program with really no football history, and they just scoop up Chip Kelly and scoop up a recruiting hotbed over there to compete with USC. The battle for LA is going to be pretty interesting in the coming years.
I think so, too. And Chip Kelly's offense is so fun. It didn't work out in the NFL because the refs actually slowed down the game a bit. But to see a play, every 5 seconds from Chip Kelly's offense, regardless if it's a 7-yard run or an interception for a touchdown, I think it's going to be a blast for Chip Kelly.
Absolutely.
Chip Kelly is going to be great for UCLA. I would have liked to see, well, not more than I would have liked to see Scott Frost here, but Chip Kelly was one of the guys on my radar that I think Nebraska should have looked at. And obviously they did. He turned down our offer, but give UCLA 2 or 3 years, and I actually think they could be in the college football playoff.
Yeah, you look at fit, and I don't know if Nebraska would have ever proceeded to actually offer Chip Kelly. They gauged his interest at the beginning of it, but I don't know if they would have proceeded to actually ever offer him, because fit has been a big thing. Bill Moose, fit.
Yeah.
Sean Eichhorst was not a fit here, and you look at guys that need to be a fit. Mike Riley really wasn't. He didn't ever really make sense
Would
here.
Matt Campbell have been a fit?
Yes. Matt Campbell's a
would
Midwest guy. Matt Campbell, I believe, will eventually be the next head coach at either Notre Dame or Ohio State when it comes to that, because he's going to continue to do good things in Ames.
Even with the 6-year deal at Iowa State?
It's going to be a while down the road. He's still a young guy. He's still like low 40s, late 30s, something like that. He's one of the youngest head coaches in college football. Obviously, Oklahoma's Lincoln Riley being the youngest, but Matt Campbell's right down there with the youngest guys. And
38 years old.
38 years old, and a very, very strong up-and-comer there in Ames. And to make the decision to stay in Ames, which has been known as a black hole for coaches, you look at a guy like Paul Rhodes. Gene Chizik got fired from Iowa State and then for some reason got hired at Auburn and then led them to a national title because he got Cam Newton. That was the weirdest sequence of things, but not quite as weird as what's going on with Tennessee now. So let me break this down for you through Lane Kiffin tweets. No, just kidding. Against Lane Kiffin tweets. What happened at Tennessee? Well, Greg Schiano, the defensive coordinator at Ohio State, was pegged to be the next head coach of Tennessee. It was leaked that there were conversations between Tennessee and Greg Schiano, the former Tampa Bay Buccaneers coach, the former Rutgers coach that led Rutgers to an 11-win season, which is 2 11-win seasons, which is something far, far more impressive than I've ever done as a coach, and a lot of people have ever done as a coach, because Rutgers, another one of those black hole places for coaches. So Greg Schiano was slated to be the next head coach of the Tennessee Volunteers. Fans found out, notably one fan who's a national media member named Clay Travis, and the fans revolted. They dug up things about Greg Schiano that was a very off the wall report about him being involved in the Sandusky case at Penn State and what he might or might not have known, and how he was secondarily referenced in one single testimony and was never actually convicted of anything or mentioned in multiple reports by the grand jury, by the attorney general that was involved in the case, anything else involved in the case aside from one little mention in a testimony from Mike McQueary, who was the obviously the whistleblower in that whole case. And Tennessee fans jumped all over it. Not because they didn't want someone complicit in the Sandusky case, no, because they found that as a convenient excuse to get Greg Schiano out of Tennessee. So they put so much pressure on the university, so much pressure on the athletic director, so much pressure on the administration that Tennessee backed out of the deal for Greg Schiano. Well, as you might expect, that's not a great look for other coaches. So they have struck out on the following coaches after that: Dave Doran, Jeff Brom, Mike Gundy, among many, many others, not including John Gruden, who they originally tried to get and also struck out on. Scott, who else have they struck out on?
Well, they pursued SMU's head coach for a while.
Chad Morris.
And so, Matt, the interesting thing here is that
Kim Jong-un
even said, I'm going to take my talents and stick with North Korea, which just so noble. But no, it's such an interesting case right now for Tennessee because of this Greg Schiano circumstance. Who's going to want to coach there? Who is...
Scott, do you want to coach there?
I would want to coach it because of their fans. Their fans are their fans
nuts.
are mean.
They're nuts.
Because
they're mean.
I saw a tweet last week that said... it was quoting like
so
the
you
new
were
Tennessee.
involved with Vol Twitter.
Yeah, it was. I was involved with Vol Twitter, but I saw a tweet last week not involved with Vol Twitter. One of the national writers said was a scenario quote of the future Tennessee head coach. He said, "So administration, will you have my back when the fans come at me?" And then it's quoting the Tennessee administration. Well, about that, the Tennessee administration has zero backbone right now.
None.
John Currie is a mess. The president, everybody involved in this hiring process is an absolute train wreck. Yet, I still think the blame falls on the fans. And the fact that they had so much say and that they can be spoiled brats and cause this hire to not go through after it was already a done deal because they're making up things or they're fabricating things about a coach and ruining his reputation, ruining his public perception based on a very, very, off-the-wall allegation about a very serious matter. It's incredible that the fans can have this power, and they don't deserve a good coach at this point.
No, they don't. And, now you think for Greg Schiano, I think he's going to be much better off than the Tennessee program because something tells me he's going to get a job down the road, and he's going to be much more thankful for that than having to deal with those Tennessee fans because ungrateful might even be an understatement for this football program right now. And so you kind of want to see them struggle for a couple of years of how they've treated coaches, how they're going to treat future employment. Name a single coach who would want to go there right now. I can't think of a single one.
T. Martin is the only one. T. Martin, the offensive coordinator at USC, who has no head coaching experience, played quarterback for the Vols, won their last national championship. Be a very Scott Frost to Nebraska situation, but Scott Frost is a more proven head coach than T. Martin, and T. Martin doesn't even call plays at USC. Clay Helton does. And so in Martin, I've heard different reports about his actual ability as an offensive coordinator. He's there for recruiting. And he could recruit well at Tennessee, being a Tennessee guy and being one of the best recruiters in his own in the country. But T. Martin seems like the only guy that would go there at this point, and I can't believe Tennessee hasn't reached out stronger to him at this point.
Yeah, and Butch probably did have to go from Tennessee. But
champions of life.
Champions of life, baby. But I just, what a nightmare. And for Husker fans, they have to be thankful that this isn't them, and it very well could have been them because Husker fans have a lot of passion, and they want to see their football team succeed. But that's why earlier in the broadcast when we talked about it, Scott Frost needs to be given time because if he's fired after 3 years, that's when coaches start to look at this position and say, why would I ever want to coach there? So it's an interesting circumstance.
I couldn't, like I said it earlier, I could never coach. Well, not that I'm going to be a college football coach anytime soon. I just would never want to coach her because I just don't like their fans. Their fans are so mean. And let me give you an example. So this is my junior year of high school, and being from Chicago, I liked Northwestern for college football. And so they
Northwestern has fans?
Yeah, like I've never heard that before.
I saw literally zero fans in their stands from a picture this year.
Oh,
of
dude,
that stadium.
It's kind of sad. I mean, but so they played a couple years ago. They played Tennessee in the Outback Bowl. And I don't know, I just responded to one of the tweets that one of the Tennessee bloggers sent out, and I said, no, Northwestern's going to beat you guys. And we lost something like 48-7. And then I have to say, within about a 30-minute time frame, I got hate and threats from probably like 100 Tennessee fans.
Oh,
it
yeah.
was terrible.
I did the same thing for that bowl game. I did the same thing, and I said Northwestern's going to win this game, and Tennessee, I don't know why Tennessee's going to why Tennessee's
Their fans
favored
are
by,
mean.
Tennessee was favored by like 21 in that game over a 10-2 Northwestern team, and I said they won't even score 21, and
we were wrong.
They scored 21 and they destroyed Northwestern, and Vol Twitter let me feel its full wrath. But I've been trolling Vol Twitter again this week.
I started having it just so I could calm them all down. I started talking about fishing because I know bass fishing is really big in Tennessee. So I'm like, hey, what's the bass fishing like in Tennessee this year? Just because I couldn't take them yelling at me anymore. It was terrible.
Trying to change the subject is Tennessee fans are easily distracted. Vol Twitter is one of the weirdest entities on the face of the planet.
They get on Vanderbilt a ton.
Yeah, they do.
It's terrible.
Oh, man. Vol Twitter is something I never want to deal with again in my life, except I do because I love trolling Tennessee fans because they're hilarious to make mad. But on with the coaching search talk. Texas A&M, Florida State, before we wrap up this segment, there is something going on there with Jimbo Fisher, a fan in an open fan forum yesterday afternoon. There's a video of this on Twitter. A fan asked Jimbo Fisher about his loyalty to Florida State, and he was quickly ushered out by quickly pushed out forcefully by an usher at the event. And so Jimbo Fisher certainly looks like the Texas A&M smoke is real at this point, which could cause a whole bunch of dominoes to fall. If Jimbo Fisher goes to Texas A&M, Willie Taggart could jump from Oregon back to Florida State. And then who was Oregon's last offensive coordinator and probably first option for a head coach? Scott Frost. Something going on there. There is smoke, and these dominoes could fall in a way that certainly does not benefit Nebraska.
No, and Willie Taggart, what an interesting circumstance for him because he's a first-year guy at Oregon, and so it's pretty rare to see someone jump from one major conference to another in just the span of a year. So to see Taggart go, but of course it all starts with Jimbo Fisher heading to Texas A&M, and what an interesting dynamic that would be because I think Sumlin did a nice job at Texas A&M, but I think Jimbo Fisher is the type of coach that can raise a program to the next level, and we've seen that with the team that contended for national titles under Fisher. So interested to see what will happen, but I think Frost ultimately will still go to Nebraska.
Well, they're going to pay Fisher to do so if he does go to Texas A&M. You got that oil money down there that could end up paying Jimbo Fisher $8 or $9 million to coach in College Station down there. So that could cause a lot of dominoes to fall. And you mentioned, Scott, Jimbo Fisher and the ability to jump from conference to conference like he has. He's not going to get more money out of Florida State after a 5-6 season. His quarterback got hurt in the first game. They scheduled another game this weekend against Louisiana Monroe just so they could get to a bowl and beat Nebraska's bowl streak nonetheless.
Right.
But Florida State about to go 6-6 and an absolute train wreck of a year for Jimbo Fisher, and I'm not surprised if he's wanting to jump ship to Texas A&M because they certainly want him over there.
Yeah.
Taggart would be an interesting dynamic down in Florida State because if that were to happen, Nebraska would be opened up to a lot more recruits in the Pacific Northwest that Oregon has snatched from Nebraska's hands. That is where Frost could come in because he has connections from Oregon to Florida and everywhere in between. Yeah. And if he's able to come scoop up some of those Oregon commits on the West Coast, that could be a big time.
Oh, my God. If Frost can get some of those guys that he's gotten, like you mentioned, on the West Coast, and maybe some of the guys he's tried to get in Florida, because I'm sure, we all know Florida's huge for college football recruiting. If he could get some of those guys to come to Nebraska, that could be big down the road.
So Scott Frost, the likely next head coach of Nebraska football, after Nebraska does not suffer through a wild coaching carousel like it seems has been everywhere in the country. Other ones to report, Ole Miss hired interim coach Matt Luke to the head coach. Very quiet process right there. Well, coming up next, NFL season winding down, and the Patriots have now won 7 straight after a 2-2 start. Are they the Super Bowl favorites at this point? We'll talk about it coming up next right here on the Spill Sports Show. Stay with us.
How to be a great dad in 15 seconds. Bike ride, go fish, walk in the park, phone call, milkshake, play catch, picnic, fly a kite, tell jokes, laugh, talk, read a story, tell a story, bumper car, swing set, bowling, pillow fight, cut loose, stay tight. Whew. Because the smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today. Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Hey, what's up? Holla at ya, boy. XOXOXO. You getting these texts? Question mark. Where are you? What are you doing? OMG, you are making me mad. You better text me back. I'm waiting outside your house.
Relentless, aggressive texting is like sending an angry robot to deliver your message. When does the robot become dangerous? Let us know at that'snotcool.com.
That'snotcool.com.
Brought to you by the Ad Council.
I'm Steve Clements, businessman and cyclist. I'm Jeff Weimeister, Chief Deputy Sheriff and cyclist. Riding on roads can be dangerous when motorists are not cautious. A year ago, I was hit by a car while biking in the county. Cyclists have a legal right to use the road, and drivers must give them at least 3 feet of space. It's the law. Cyclists should wear helmets, be highly visible, and use lights after dark. We can share the road safely. Learn more at lincoln.ne.gov.
Imagine never being able to drive, to watch TV, or even read Harry Potter. Reading is essential to our lives. City Impact Reading Center helps Lincoln Public Elementary Schools boost their students' reading scores by getting all students at or above their grade's reading level. Each week, volunteers of all ages go sit and read with students. You can help a student gain an important life skill and help change their future. If you're looking for some rewarding volunteer experiences, please visit their website at cityimpact.org.
Today in school, I learned a lot. In chemistry, I learned that no one likes me. In biology, I learned that I'm fat and stupid. In English, I learned that I'm disgusting. And in gym, I learned that I'm pathetic and a joke. The only thing I didn't learn in school today is why no one ever helps.
Kids witness bullying every day. They want to help, but they don't know how. Teach them how to stop bullying and be more than a bystander at stopbullying.gov. A message from the Ad Council.
Check out my new time machine.
Does it work?
Hit the button.
Hey, it's Napoleon.
Oui. Check out the future.
Hey, you have a nice house. Why don't I?
You didn't save any money, buddy.
If only there was a way I could go back in time and fix that.
Yeah.
Save something for the future. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free ways to save, go to feedthepig.org. That's feedthepig.org.
This message brought to you by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants and the Ad Council.
There are many healthy things you can do with your anger. Things that don't hurt anybody.
Back here in studio, Spill Sports Show on your Thursday drive time. We're going the full 2 hours today, Scott. When's the last time we did that?
You know, maybe back in Nam or something. Who
Back
knows?
in Nam, back in 09. You know, 09 was a great year. 09 was a great year. Huskers lose by 1 point to Texas in the Big 12 championship game. Go on to rout Arizona 33-0 in the Holiday Bowl. Bo Pelini declares Nebraska is back and here to stay, and now 8 years later, certainly not. As they go through their about to welcome in the third head coach in that as many years, it seems, as Bo Pelini was fired, Mike Riley was fired, and now Nebraska about to welcome in a new head coach. Well, one head coach in the NFL that seems to have been there forever and that people were jokingly referencing as a candidate for the Nebraska job. Bill Belichick and his quarterback, Tom Brady, have won 7 straight games, and it certainly looks like they are the best team in the NFL right now. You look at these last 3 results: at Denver, 41-16 win, at Oakland, 33-8 win, and home against Miami, a 35-17 win. New England's been straight up dominant all the way through. And now a couple divisional games before they end up going on the road to Pittsburgh on December 17th. Can this Pats team be stopped, or is it Super Bowl bound once again?
Well, the tough thing is the AFC just isn't nearly as tough as it has been in the past. The AFC West is a complete joke. At one point, it was considered maybe the best division in football this year coming into the start of the season. Now, the Los Angeles Chargers might be the front runners of this division. The Buffalo Bills might give the Patriots a bit of a tough time in those division games, but I think they had to be the front runners for the AFC.
Yeah, absolutely. The Rams, I don't know if they're totally for real yet. I think they're definitely playing well. I don't know if that record is as good as it. I don't know if that record means that team is as good as it is, but I think down the road, I actually like the Seahawks' chances better than I like the Rams. And I just think that's because of that experience.
Well, Scott, you mentioned the AFC West and how bad that has been all year. What's happened at Kansas City? 3 straight losses. They went on the road to New England in the season opener and beat the Patriots soundly. Kareem Hunt on record pace for a rookie running back out of Toledo, the 3rd-round pick. He was, and they've been impressive at times, and they've been really, really unimpressive at times, and it all came crashing down in a home loss to Buffalo in which the offense sputtered.
Well, and, they have one win in their last 6 games, and that was against Denver, and it was an ugly win. It starts with their quarterback play right now. Alex Smith is really struggling to get anything going on the offensive side. Defenses are just really running that cover 2 zone, and the Chiefs are struggling to pick it apart, and they have 12 points against, or 9 points against the Giants. They scored 17 against the Cowboys.
They lost to the Giants.
Terrible. The Giants'
can
2
we
wins
just
are against
focus
AFC
on
West
that again?
teams.
Can we focus on that again for a second? Kansas City lost to the New York Giants this year, who just benched Eli Manning for Geno Smith.
There's Ben McAdoo for you.
Yeah, well, and we'll get into the Giants a bit later, and the 2 wins the Giants have are against AFC West teams, the Denver Broncos and the Kansas City Chiefs. So
yeah,
you
your
could
Broncos are hemorrhaging things.
They are really terrible, and the Giants, they're the best team in the AFC West now.
The Giants are the best team in the AFC West. Not an outlandish statement, as Oakland certainly performing below expectations, but it seems like nobody wants to win that AFC West. It seems like they're lining up for that 4th seed, and maybe Kansas City is just doing this to troll all of us and go in that first round of the playoffs and or the second round of the playoffs and beat New England in Foxborough once again and say, all right, so Kansas City might be for real. We don't know. It's been a weird season in the NFL for sure.
I never really thought the Chiefs were totally for real. I sort of thought they were going to hit the skid a bit, and I just think I think it's because of Alex Smith. He's had a great season. Don't get me wrong. I've never thought he's been that great of a quarterback. Honestly, he seems like a Jay Cutler on steroids, if you want my honest opinion. He reminds me of Jay Cutler a bit, that he's a good quarterback, but he's not going to win you a Super Bowl. You need a Drew Brees, a Tom Brady, an Aaron Rodgers, somebody like that to win you a Super Bowl.
If the Elite One won a Super Bowl, I think a lot of quarterbacks can win a Super
yeah.
Bowl. Joe Flacco has
the
a
elite
Super Bowl
one.
ring.
Yeah, So I got a question for you guys. Do you think Joe Flacco's elite?
I think
Yes.
Joe Flacco is
No.
elite. I have a shirt that says so. I wear it frequently just when I want to make David mad, and it works like a charm. Well, we mentioned the New York Giants, and we have avoided this subject for long enough, Scott.
Yikes.
Ben McAdoo, a complete train wreck. We'll talk about it a little bit with Giants superfan and Huskers reporter Robin Washut in the next hour, but Ben McAdoo absolutely tanking the Giants right now, and Geno Smith for Eli Manning. They have Davis Webb in there at that 3rd-string quarterback. Why not get him some experience? If you're going to bench Eli Manning and ruin one of the legends' start streaks, one of the classiest guys in the league, why do it for Geno Smith?
And that's the biggest question mark on this. If Geno Smith is a rookie into this NFL, or is a rookie in the NFL, yeah, fine. Start Geno if you really have that big of a problem with Eli Manning. But here's the thing. The Giants are 2-9. They have no chance at making the playoffs yet. This is a move that is just puzzling because Geno Smith he will forever be a backup quarterback in the NFL.
Maybe.
Maybe, and yeah, I know he's starting for the Giants. He's not a guy that you want to be your starting quarterback. And so this move just does not make sense to me.
No, we know what Geno Smith is capable of, and that's not a ton. I'm sorry to Geno Smith fans, but I don't think he's a very good quarterback. And I think Eli Manning is one of the most underrated quarterbacks to ever play the game. He's won a couple of Super Bowls. He's really good. He can throw the ball far, and it's surprising to me how bad the Giants are. But a question I have for you guys is what's next for Eli now?
Yeah, I think he started his last game for the Giants.
You think he's out?
It's really inevitable at this point.
Yeah.
And he got emotional when talking about it the other day in his locker room press conference as He revealed to reporters that he wouldn't be starting, and they got his reaction on what happened with that. And he said he didn't know if he had started his last game with the Giants, and certainly seems that way.
Yeah, it's really hard to imagine, even if McAdoo is fired, to see Eli return with the Giants. And I'm not saying that his career is over, but he is 36 years old. He's getting up there in age, and he's not the perfect quarterback he once was, and he wasn't a perfect quarterback back in the day either.
No.
But it'll be interesting to see if teams go after Eli. It'll be a small field of maybe 3 or 4 teams that might go after the quarterback, but it's hard to imagine anyone going after him very hard and offering him the big cash.
Hasn't had a ton of injury issues. Hasn't had a ton of those, and certainly
he's been successful.
He's been
for
successful
most of his career,
but he is reaching the end of the line. He knows that. We all know that from watching him. And even though the injuries aren't there, maybe a team takes a chance on him after this year. It's just going to be really hard to see Eli Manning in a non-blue uniform.
And the question is, what team it really would go after him? Maybe the Cardinals.
Lot more teams than would go after Kaepernick at this point.
Oh,
Eli
absolutely.
Manning has no baggage, is a classy guy, has always been, and would be a really, really benefit to any locker room, whether he's playing or as a backup. But that really comes down to his decision. When you go after these legends, especially one that has won 2 Super Bowls and is from a family with such a high pedigree as the Mannings are in the quarterback world, they really make their own timetable. And this isn't Peyton. I don't think Eli wants to go past the end of his prime, and he is at the end of his prime. He's past the end of his prime. I don't know how much further he wants to go past this.
Do you guys think maybe someone like the Jaguars would release Blake Bortles for him?
No.
Blake
Bortles is 7-4 this year.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I just think, would they be better if they had Eli Manning?
I don't think so. I think Blake Bortles is consistently underappreciated. And you got to look at the Twitter account Blake Bortles Facts to understand that Blake Bortles is a great quarterback. One of the better accounts on Twitter. It's just one big old troll account. But no, I think Blake Bortles is consistently ragged on, and I think he's a pretty good quarterback. I think I think he could start for quite a few teams right now, and the Jaguars are 7-4, keeping pace with Tennessee at the top of that AFC South division. Certainly looking interesting right now.
Yeah, much better than I would have thought the Jaguars would have done this year, and not as good as I thought the Titans would do this year. I thought the Titans were going to be one of the best teams in the AFC, and don't get me wrong, they're definitely up there. They're one of the better teams in the NFL, but I'm shocked at how well the Jaguars have played. You look at some of the games that they've had. They held Houston to 7 points, and you know how good Deshaun Watson was until he got hurt. Held the Ravens to 7 points. It's been the defense that's also been pretty good for them.
Yeah, absolutely. They've been a really good defensive team. They've been building that defensive core, especially the secondary, for quite a while in Jacksonville.
They have, and it's been a long, slow-moving process. And, guys, the NFL is better when Jacksonville is better. And is that a true statement? Absolutely not, but I'm going to stick by it because I love seeing the Jags back, baby. I want to see them in the playoffs.
Small market, but big city. The biggest city in Florida is Jacksonville, and you don't see it in the same light. Yeah, that is true. You don't see it in the same light as like Orlando and Tampa and Miami, but Jacksonville, the largest city in Florida, just not a great sports market down there. Well, a great sports market, and what has been a great sports market in recent years, is the Bay Area, but they've got 2 pretty bad teams over there and 1 really bad team in San Francisco. And I'm saying this because I can't say it when David's here, but when is San Francisco going to finally hand the keys to Jimmy Garoppolo and bench C.J. Beathard? He's not an NFL quarterback, and David would fight me on this because he's a big Iowa homer, but C.J. Beathard is not an NFL quarterback.
Well, here's the thing. Beathard's hurt, so Garoppolo will get his first start of the season against the Chicago Bears. How about that? And I think Garoppolo is a far better quarterback. I think he can be successful in the NFL.
And probably the best-looking quarterback in the
NFL.
NFL.
Man, he is good-looking. He is eye candy.
Oh, yeah, I can even admit that one.
Easy on the eyes, says Scott Ayers.
Easy on the eye. And I think, the 49ers.
Wow.
The 49ers.
They need something,
Interesting
right?
first day on the spill.
Yeah. Welcome
to the Spill Sports Show.
Thanks, boys.
We talk about how dreamy Bob Diaco is. We talk about Jimmy Garoppolo. We'll talk about how Scott Frost's jawline is one of the best in college football here in the coming weeks. if he is indeed named the Nebraska Cornhuskers football coach. We'll probably talk about it anyway, just because that jawline is something to be reckoned with, Scott.
Oh, you got that right. But, you think of a team like the 49ers, you say, man, they're bad. And then you look over, man, we were there, Cleveland. We drove by Cleveland when the Browns were playing, baby. And they still haven't won a football game. You want to talk about a very bad sports franchise? Look no further than the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, we were driving by the stadium, and there was no traffic. This was 45 minutes after game start. There was no traffic, and there were still people. There were a few people still filing into the stadium. I don't know. They were losing. Go figure. I think they were playing Jacksonville. But there were people still filing into the stadium 45 minutes after game start, and there was no traffic at all. A little concerning, right? There were more people lined up outside the queue for the next Cavs game 2 days after than there were that were in the Browns stadium. That's a nice stadium too.
Yeah, it's a very nice stadium. We looked by it, and the weather was just about how you would think Cleveland to be, just gross and muggy, and
muggy. It was cold.
It was cold, and I think we saw some tears from those Cleveland fans, and man, it was brutal. It was very brutal.
Tears.
That must have been terrifying.
Tears certainly streaming out of Scott's eyes for having to go through Cleveland on our way home from Penn State. Yeah, not trying to throw too much.
We should get Joakim Noah on the show to get his opinion on Cleveland.
We should get Joakim Noah on the show for his opinion on a lot of things. Make that happen, Scott. You're our new producer.
Yeah. I'll email him right now.
You're working on that 30 for 30 on Peyton Manning. Maybe just reach out to
Joakim.
To Joakim Noah. It would be a very Scott Ayers thing to do.
To get a Joakim interview.
Well, in college basketball, Nebraska was able to fend off Boston College last night thanks to a barrage of threes, notably from Evan Taylor finding his three-point stroke. And we'll talk about that a little bit next as the Huskers improved to 6-2 on the year and stay undefeated at home heading in to a brutal 4-game stretch. We'll talk about that between us in the next segment, and then we'll bring in Robin Washut of HuskerOnline.com at 4:30 to break it all down for us. That's all coming up in the second hour of the Spill Sports Show. Stay with us.
Every year, millions of cats are put down because they can't find a home. The Cat House in Lincoln is doing their best to change that, but they need your help. Whether you're looking to adopt or just want to help the cause, the Cat House is the place to go. There are all sorts of ways to get involved, from donating food and other supplies to volunteering. And if you have a cat, make sure to get them spayed or neutered to help cut down on the number of cats in shelters. If you want to make a difference in an animal's life, check out the Cat House or visit their website at cathouse.org.
Dad, I'm hungry. Why don't we have anything to eat?
Those are words you never want to hear as a parent. But unfortunately, putting food on the table is a constant struggle for many low-income families here in Lincoln, and they don't have the necessary skills to get and maintain a job. They rely on volunteers at the Center for People in Need that can help them through the struggle. You can make a difference in their lives by getting involved in one of the many volunteer programs that the Center for People in Need offers. For more information, please visit centerforpeopleinneed.org.
We are live outside the home of Joe and Rosie Goddard, where a pretty big tickle fight broke out just minutes ago. Sources say their father instigated the laughter. Let's go inside for a comment. Apparently, they have no comment. Dads, let this be a reminder that it only takes a moment to make a moment. Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
She didn't want it, yet she got it. She got something no one deserves. Abuse. To start healing, you can't be silent. Your voice has to be heard. Voices of Hope provides free, confidential services on dating, domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking issues. Walk-in hours are available Tuesday afternoons from 2 to 6 in the City Campus Union. For more information, visit www.voicesofhopelincoln.com. Voices of Hope. With your voice and others, find hope.
Having a place to go after school will make you a better student. Having an outlet to express yourself will make you a better artist. Having something to do together will make you a better family. At the Y, we're helping build better friends, listeners, writers, swimmers, scientists, and musicians, one chance at a time. Give the gift of opportunity. Support the Y at ymca.net. The Y, for a better us.
Bring 'em out, bring 'em out, bring 'em out, bring 'em out. It's hard to yell when the barrel's in your mouth. Come on.
You're listening to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU.
Just gotta do what I gotta do, and when I gotta do it, you know. So basically, just doing what I gotta do every time I step on the court and do what I gotta do.
Now, for drive time entertainment, Matt Reynoldson, David Eicholt, and Scott Ayers.
Woman and child did that. Put them in the aisle. Johnny the Jet Rogers just tore them loose from their shoes. You believe in miracles? Yes!
Comes to LeBron. He takes a fadeaway for the win. Hey! Knocked it down!
There goes Davis. Oh, my God! Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
You can't believe what just happened. What a time to be alive.
Hit me with the horn, 20. Keep making noise! Keep making noise! Yeah! Oh, 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 oh! Here we go now! 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 Check it out!
Welcome in to the second hour of the Spill Sports Show, live and worldwide here on KRNU2 at krnu.unl.edu and our podcast at thespillkrnu.wordpress.com. We're joining you on a Thursday drive time. Matt Reynoldson, Scott Ayers, Jake Bartecki sitting in for David Eicholt on a beautiful Thursday afternoon in downtown Lincoln. Unseasonably warm on the final day of November as Nebraska ball was heating up last night in PBA, defeating Boston College 71-62, thanks to a very balanced performance from players like Glenn Watson, Isaac Copeland, and Evan Taylor, all in double figures on the night. And an impressive performance down the stretch by Nebraska, fighting off a big 6-minute scoring drought and some questionable calls from the officials to end up winning that game and getting a big win for the Big Ten in the Big Ten ACC Challenge.
Matt, and I can't help but chuckle because one of the biggest problems Nebraska has had for the last few years are those terrible scoring droughts. You mentioned it, a 6-minute one last night, and that's something that Tim Miles will need to improve, especially going into just a tough stretch of games. But last night, they were able to really finish things off, but free throw shooting, they shot 52% from the free throw line, something that they will need to work on. However, winning a game against a big-time, not a big-time school, but against a school like Boston College is huge, especially after those two early losses against Central Florida and St. John's.
Yeah, and I will admit, I think they actually have a shot in a couple of these games, these next four, because when they do want to play well, and then when this team does play well, I think they're actually a pretty competitive basketball team, and I think their best shot is no doubt against Minnesota on Tuesday night. And I think they could possibly give Creighton a run for their money because we look at Northwestern, who's turned out to not be that good. They almost beat Creighton, so, why not Nebraska? Nebraska might have some fans there. They're going to have a little bit more of an advantage.
Huskers will definitely pack the CenturyLink Center in Omaha for that game against Creighton. It'll certainly be a good one up there. That is toward the back end of Nebraska's stretch coming up here, and Kansas closes it at home, another top 5 team, but it starts off with Michigan State, and Miles Bridges and that returning cast for Michigan State has really made them one of the most feared teams in the country.
Yeah, and this is a game that Nebraska's going to have to play their best to beat Michigan State, a team that absolutely dominated North Carolina just a few nights ago, and so you mentioned Miles Bridges, and I think it will come down to the perimeter shooting for Nebraska. This is a team that at times can go on sprees of shooting 6 of 7 from beyond the arc, and then they'll miss 12 straight after that. And not only that, but it's their defense on the other side. They give up a lot of open looks beyond the perimeter. That happened a lot last season, and early on here as well. So Boston College, I think, had about 23-point attempts and finished 4 of 20. But if you give a team like Michigan State a lot of looks from beyond the arc, you're going to pay the price.
Michigan State, a very balanced attack with 5 players averaging in double figures, and that defense we saw last year with Nebraska and Michigan State. Yeah. Miles Bridges can block a bunch of shots.
Oh, yeah, they can do it again this year, too. I mean, averaging about 7 blocks per game. That's a crazy number. That's more than a lot of teams. And you look at the stats-wise, their stats prove how good they are. They shoot about 50% from the field, and they hold their opponents to less than 35%. I mean, this team is really, really good. I personally don't think Nebraska really has any chance of winning this game. I think they could go in there and make it close, but I think Michigan State's gonna hand it to us.
Yet the last NCAA tournament appearance, Nebraska went on the road and beat a top 25 Michigan State team. And then
That's true.
2 years ago, yet again, Nebraska on the road beats a Michigan State team in the Breslin Center. The Huskers seem to like that venue, obviously taking the loss there last year as well as the loss at home. But the Huskers really like the Breslin Center, and they can beat Michigan State. Something about that green on the uniform doesn't seem to scare the Big Red.
I know, and that's what's been so impressive, Matt. And I'm glad you met. Last year they struggled at times, but 2 years, 3 years ago, Nebraska was handing it to Michigan State. And I think that Tim Miles there's something about him against Tom Izzo where I don't know if you can necessarily say he has his number, but I mean, Nebraska seems to be competing against this top touted Michigan State team every single year. So it should be an interesting game. James Palmer and Glenn Watson, the two guards for Nebraska, really have to step up in this game.
Evan Taylor, too. I mean, he only made 8 3-pointers all last season. He's got 5 already. I mean, he's playing really well. He's shooting the ball well. And I think I said at the beginning of the season, I think Nebraska's team this year is a lot deeper than it has been in the past. Anton Gill, Isaiah Roby, when he's healthy, is really good. I think this team's better than the teams they've had in the past, and I think I'm going to venture to say it's probably the best team that we've had since the teams with Teron Petaway.
And it's certainly the most talented team maybe in Nebraska basketball history, certainly in the Tim Miles era. But we mentioned that Tim Miles does not seem to be scared of that green on the other uniform. He tends to be scared of that royal blue on the uniform, an 0 record against Greg McDermott and the Creighton Blue Jays in his time here. For some reason, Creighton back to their winning ways once again. Greg McDermott, again, another great coaching job of the Creighton Blue Jays in the Big East. And the Huskers going on the road this year and will look to finally end the skid against Creighton. The first matchup against a Big East team did not go so well as the Huskers got shut down at St. John's. Little less distance to travel, 45 minutes driving versus a 3-hour flight to New York. However, it certainly looks like Nebraska will be up against a top 25 Creighton team.
Well, and, it was more than just traveling. When your offense can only score 56 points in a game, and I know Tim Miles really preaches defense, but it's tough to win if you score under that 60-point mark. And in both their losses, they scored 59 against Central Florida and 56 against St. John's. And defense will have to be at an all-time high once again against Creighton. A lot of outside perimeter looks in last year's loss. So they really have to make sure they don't make too many of those mistakes.
Yeah, and they got to shoot the ball well. And I said it last night on the pregame show for the game. I think when the Huskers shoot the ball well, they win. And when they don't win. And less than 35% both losses that they have, and over 45% for all the wins that they have. So I think the key is going to come down to shooting the ball, especially in these next 4 games. And I think it's going to be tough. They're going to have to try and get inside against Michigan State because they do have a bit of a size advantage. And I think Jordy Schmong is going to really have to toughen up. I mean, he's so big, but he doesn't overpower any of the guys that guard him.
This team is Duke when it's good and Mississippi Valley State when it's bad.
Yeah, no kidding.
Nebraska can go on stretches of 5 or 6 minutes where it's scoring lights out, not missing a shot, moving the ball extremely well, looking like the Showtime Lakers out there. And then they can go on stretches where they're looking like 2010 Nebraska
it's
ball,
like Matt
which
Reynoldson
can't get the
and
ball
Scott
off the
Ayers.
floor. Yeah, Matt Reynoldson and rec basketball is just taking dumb shots and not passing the ball, not playing any defense and turning the ball over. Doing that all the time.
Not giving the ball to your teammates.
Exactly. Not giving the ball to my teammates. No, but they don't share the ball well when they're not playing well, and they don't play defense when they're not playing well. But when they are, this team still looks like they could beat anybody.
Well, and that's the thing too. I was talking to Jerry Renaud, a teacher here at the university last night, and we were saying, there could be 10 minutes gone in the first half. The Huskers could have 26 points, lights out. And then 7 minutes later, they had scored 4 more points. These are the type of droughts Nebraska goes on, and it kills them, and it hurts them. But That's why Tim Miles, I think that's his biggest critic right now. I mean, he has quite a few working on his players hitting from the charity stripe or whatever, but it's these droughts and being able to realize, hey, let's move the ball around a little bit more, because the biggest problem is even last year you would see Ty Webster pull up from about 20 feet, or 10 feet from beyond the arc, and no one would agree with that shot selection. So getting the right shot selection is huge for those droughts.
There's no kidding. Last night they had a bit of a drought, but the difference was last night Tim Miles figured out how to get them out of the drought. He changed some things up. They started hitting their shots again, and they ended up getting the win. And once they went up by 14 with about a minute and 57 seconds left in the game, they were able to hang on. So as long as they can get out of those dry spells of scoring, they can hang around with some of these teams. I don't know how well it'll work in these next 4 games, but I think we'll be able to tell early and often how well we'll do against these teams.
That'll certainly be a point of emphasis against, like you mentioned, Michigan State, but also Minnesota, the next home game the Huskers have, and they made it an emphasis to control home floor this year. Minnesota coming in will likely be a top 15 team, suffered their first loss last night at the hands of Miami at home, but they're coming to Lincoln. Tough road environment for anybody, one of the top 10 venues in the country, packed full of 15,000 fans, all clad in red, and a really noise-centric atmosphere in this big new arena right in downtown Lincoln. PBA is going to be a force again, I believe, this year, and Nebraska will get a chance to test it out early with the 2 early Big Ten games this year.
And I think this is the game out of the 4 where Nebraska has the best chance against the Gophers. I think Minnesota's a great team. I can see them as a top 5 seed, in this year's NCAA tournament. However, Nebraska, Michigan State, Minnesota, Creighton, and Kansas, the kiss of death right there. But Nebraska's guard play has been the most impressive part. I think Copeland's played great as well. And all 3 of those guys you can see having big games, or a big night, against the Gophers.
Yeah, I think I watched part of Minnesota. I was covering last night's game, but I watched part of Minnesota on my laptop, and I think they are beatable. I just think, like I said a few minutes ago, I think Schmanga's going to have to use his size. He's bigger than some of those guys. He's bigger than Coffee. He's bigger than some of the interior guards that the Gophers have. And I think they've sort of figured out zone coverage. Because last night, Boston College was in the zone for a majority of the game. They stuck to their guns in the second half. And you know what? It didn't work. Nebraska figured it out. It worked for a little bit when they got in that dry spell. But I'll tell you what, I really think that their best shot is the Gophers. And then I'd throw Creighton in there, too, just for the same reason that they're going to have some fans there.
Talk a little bit about big-time X's and O's storylines between football and basketball coming up next with Robin Washut. But I want to touch on the one game that we haven't really touched on yet, and it's the big one, Kansas at home, Saturday, December 16th. And boy, will that one be a doozy. The Jayhawks coming in as a likely top 5 team. You can likely hear it right here on 90.3 KRNU. As Nebraska welcomes the Jayhawks for the first time since the old Big 12 days. That'll be certainly be a matchup to watch.
Yeah, and Kansas is a team that's averaging 95 points a game. They've beaten Kentucky already this year and just seem to be producing top talent every single season, and it's no different this year. Devontae Graham coming back, averaging 15 points and 8 assists per game, the leader of this Jayhawk team. Nebraska will have to shut him and a whole lot of other players down if they want to win.
Yeah, Kansas has 2 or 3 guys that are averaging double-doubles per game, so it's not all on the shoulders of one player. They're going to spread the ball around, and, I don't know what the relations are between Self and Miles, but it's a classic Big 8 rivalry. It's going to be a lot of fun, and, it's over break, and I'll be home for that, which is kind of a bummer. But I'll tell you what, it's going to be a really fun game, and I don't think that we really have a shot against Kansas, but I think it's going to be a fun atmosphere.
Certainly primetime TV watching or radio listening on 90.3 KRNU as we broadcast that game from PBA. It'll certainly be a wild atmosphere. Well, coming up next, Husker Online's Robin Washut joins us to talk a little bit about the deeper impact of the game last night and the Huskers getting a big home win on the hardwood, And we'll talk a little bit about the coaching search, what Bill Moose is looking for in a new head coach, and what the program culture will be like going forward. That's with Robin Washut of Husker Online coming up next right here on the Spill Sports Show. Stay with us.
Hey.
Hi, nice neighborhood. You must have a strong community association board.
I don't pay any attention to that stuff.
How do you know the board and community manager are making the right decisions?
I don't, but what can I do?
Connect with CAI.
CA what?
CAI, Community Associations Institute. They're a nonprofit group with free resources for your board, training for community managers, and information for homeowners.
Protect your investment at responsiblecommunities.com.
A new guideline on how to treat a first seizure has been released by the American Academy of Neurology and the American Epilepsy Society. The guideline found the risk of another seizure is greatest within the first 2 years, but that taking epilepsy drugs immediately after a first seizure may reduce the risk of having another seizure. Neurologists and patients must discuss risks and benefits before starting any treatment. To learn more about epilepsy, visit AAN.com. That's AAN.com.
I'm Demi Lovato. Living with bipolar disorder, there were so many times that I felt like I was alone. The hardest part was dealing with my bipolar depression. I finally hit rock bottom and decided to get help. Then slowly things started to change. For me, it takes speaking up, finding the right treatment plan, and getting back to what I love.
I will be rising from the ground like a skyscraper.
Visit BeVocalSpeakUp.com to use your voice to make a difference. That's BeVocalSpeakUp.com.
Okay, here are 3 important reasons why your son or daughter should play a sport in high school.
Number 1.
High school sports teach valuable life lessons like self-discipline and time management skills.
2.
Teens who play a high school sport have better grade point averages.
And number 3.
High school sports are safer than ever before.
This message presented by the Nebraska School Activities Association and the Nebraska State Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association.
The risk of an American man developing cancer in his lifetime is a little less than 1 in 2. The risk of an American woman developing cancer in her lifetime is a little more than 1 in 3, but the death rates of cancer have been declining in men and women since the early 1990s.
I relay for the support of my sister.
I relay for the support of my grandfather.
I relay for the support of my uncle.
Keep helping those in need by participating in Relay for Life. Join us for Relay for Life at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln each year to fight back against cancer. Sign up for your community event or donate at relayforlife.org.
Back here on the Spill Sports Show on a Thursday afternoon, Matt Reynoldson, Scott Ayers, Jake Bartecki sitting in for David Eicholt on your Thursday drive time, and we welcome in Husker Online's Robin Washut, who is not very happy about his New York Giants lately and the benching of Eli Manning, which we talked about a couple segments ago.
It's not good, Matt. It's been a dark week. It's been a dark week for everybody involved in Big Blue Nation.
Certainly a dark week for the New York Giants fans, but not really a dark week for Husker Nation, as many expect Scott Frost to be the new head coach named this weekend. And you were in the press conference in which Bill Moose outlined his expectations for the program and how Mike Riley didn't necessarily meet those. We were talking about it a little bit earlier, and how some of the discipline things weren't necessarily there, and some of maybe the locker room cleanliness, little things like that. Can you outline what Bill Moose meant by those comments?
I think he was more just talking about a foundation of discipline. It seems like little mundane things that, like picking up after yourself in a plane or a locker room or a bus, or wearing your uniform the right way, or just, handling yourself essentially like a professional. But those little things add up to create a culture within your program that pretty clearly Nebraska was lacking. There's a lot of great things you can say about Mike Riley and what he did, but I think maybe one of his biggest faults was how easygoing and how lax he was in his style. Just think about, when the Big Ten Network guys would come every year, their comments were just about how easygoing and kind of loosey-goosey the practices were. And those are the things that you don't hear about from Wisconsin practices or Iowa practices or especially Ohio State practices. I mean, it was almost like there was just this too, everybody's happy, easygoing type attitude. And I think that was reflective in how Nebraska played. When it came down to crunch time, they fell up short more often than not. So I think that's kind of what Moose is getting at, is that if it's Frost or whoever it might be that takes over, they need to kind of reestablish a culture that starts with just discipline within the smallest things, because when you take care of that stuff, everything else you need to try and accomplish within building a program becomes a lot easier.
Hey, Robin, Scott here, and, you mentioned the change in the culture, and when a new head coach comes in, there's the worries of maybe losing recruits or seeing players transfer. If Frost is indeed the guy, what does he need to do really to ensure some of the players like, J.D. Spielman made a comment on Twitter, and obviously Stanley Morgan might have gone either way, but even those recruits that Nebraska still might want to hold on to, what does Frost need to do to keep those guys?
I mean, he just describe what his plan is, not only schematically, but with what his vision is, for this program going forward, and then lay out how each one of those players is going to fit in that mold and kind of where they stand. The thing is, college sports today is so much of why kids come to schools because of relationships with coaches. I mean, there are kids on the team right now that would not even have given Nebraska a second look had it not been for an assistant coach or two that was on the previous staff. And so, of course, they're going to reevaluate their options and maybe see what else is out there. But at the same time, you're talking about, theoretically, if it is Frost, a coaching staff coming in here that has a lot to sell. I mean, they were the most potent offense in college football this year. And so a guy like J.D. Spielman, you can pretty much lay out, hey, if you stick around, this is how we're going to use you. You're going to put up huge numbers, and, it's all going to be great for everybody. But, there are also guys that are going to get, phased out a little bit that don't fit what Frost is going to try to do, and it's probably going to be best for both of them to move on. So with every coaching change you get, you're going to get attrition. I mean, that's inevitable. It's going to happen. There's no way to prevent it. But I think that as long as, Frost and his staff are able to kind of clearly lay out how a guy like J.D. Spielman, maybe even a guy like Stanley Morgan, can fit and can thrive in their system, I think that you'll be able to retain some of those key pieces, far more than, with just the unknowns that are going on facing these kids right now.
Hey, Robin, this is Jake here. I had a question for you about Tanner Lee. And, I mean, Scott Frost, and Scott Frost was a quarterback. And Tanner Lee, what does this mean for him? If he sticks around and Scott Frost does come here, which we're all assuming he does, what does Scott Frost have to do to develop Tanner Lee into a better quarterback?
Yeah, I would put it as unlikely that Tanner stays. First of all, he's a fifth-year junior who was already getting attention from NFL scouts and people at the Senior Bowl and guys like Chris Mortensen. So he's already on the NFL radar. And when you look at his numbers, they were pretty on par with the Sam Darnolds and even Josh Rosen's out there, just statistically speaking, even the interception totals. And then with the way he was able to end the year, any NFL scout that was at those games and watched those things play out know that he's a lot better than what his numbers would indicate. And so I think he's not a good fit for what Scott Frost wants to do. The quarterback position requires far more mobility than what Tanner Lee offers. So, he's one of those guys I think would be best for both parties, to go on and try your luck in the NFL, which I'm pretty confident he will get drafted. So, I think it's kind of an inevitable situation there. But you look at those other two quarterbacks, I think Patrick O'Brien and especially Tristan Gebbia can fit what Scott Frost wants to do. O'Brien showed he's a lot more mobile than maybe people thought, especially with how he played against Minnesota earlier this year. So, I think that he has that element that would make him a guy that could run the system. Obviously, Tristan Gebbia is probably even more so. I think he's even, more of a dual threat type guy who I think would be a perfect fit for what, Frost wants to do. But there's a lot of different ways they can go in with that quarterback position recruiting, too. Obviously, everybody's talking about Terry Wilson, former Nebraska commit, who ended up following Frost to Oregon, who's already publicly said he would be interested in coming to Nebraska out of junior college if Frost were to get the job and were to offer him. So there's a lot of different ways they can go. It's going to be I'm sure a interesting spring at that position, maybe more so than any other spot. But I think Tanner Lee is probably the one guy that's going to be the odd man out, just because his skill set doesn't really lend itself to what Frost wants to do.
We're joined by Robin Washut, reporter for Husker Online, here on the Spill Sports Show. Matt Reynoldson, Scott Ayers, Jake Bartecki in for David Eicholt. And switching gears on you, Robin, here, basketball. Last night, the Huskers defeated Boston College 71-62 at home, fought off a 6+ minute scoring drought at home, what we've come to be used to when it comes to Husker basketball. But they fought it off, and they were able to get a big win for the Big Ten in the Big Ten ACC Challenge and sort of even the score right there. What did you see from that game last night that's maybe something to build on moving forward?
Well, obviously you mentioned the scoring drought, and that's still a concern, the fact that those keep happening night in, night out. But that one was a little different. There were 2 potential and 1 calls that were called as charges that could have really swung, that stretch and ended it a lot sooner than it ended up being. But that being said, one of the things that, Tim Miles was really preaching going into that game was just finding a way to play, full 40 minutes and not have those dramatic swings where they can look really good for a few minutes and then a minute later they look absolutely terrible. And so you got a little bit of that, especially during that drought in the second half. But I thought by and large that was maybe their most complete effort of the year. They didn't trail the whole game, and even when they were struggling, they were able to step up their play defensively to keep control of the lead and stay in front throughout. So that was definitely encouraging. It is Boston College. They're a team that won 9 games a year ago, has 0 wins over a Power 5 school, and hasn't won a road game since 2015. But nonetheless, it was a win, and this is a team that it doesn't matter about style points. It doesn't matter about, how good you look in the victory. All that matters is your final record and how much over 500 you can get by the end of the year. So Tim Miles said going into the year, when he charted out where this team needed to be to stay on track for postseason play, they needed to have at least 6 wins at this point in the season. So they're at the bare minimum, and they're on track. And that's basically all you can ask for, especially going into what is by far the most grueling stretch of the schedule coming up over these next 4 games.
And, Robin, Nebraska has had these bad scoring droughts, and I remember even in the North Texas game, they went on a bit of a drought to start that second half, and it's when teams go to zone defenses. Why do you think the Huskers have been struggling so far this year against the zone?
Well, it's because they stop attacking. There are a few guys on the roster that when the half-court offense breaks down, they need someone to go make a play, they can just go to the rim and find a way to get points. And James Palmer is probably one of the few guys that you can consistently count on to be that guy. And so that's been an issue, is that they don't have, other guys that have been willing to be the aggressors offensively. And so they've been better with their three-point shooting, but when those shots stop falling, they need to figure it out and take it to the rim, because that's how you break yourself out of the slump, like the ones we've seen each game so far. Is if you're getting to the rim, either you're going to score or you're going to get a high percentage shot or you're going to get fouled. And so that's what they need to resort to when those cold streaks happen. They need more than just James Palmer to be the assertive player and kind of force the issue at the rim. So I think that's probably the easiest solution for those types of droughts. But again, it goes to a lot of other things too. They've been getting into foul trouble. I think fatigue, especially with those starters. They played a lot of minutes, and while they do have more depth, there's a lot of empty minutes going on right now with some of those bench players. And so, that's something they need to address. The long story short, they got to be the ones that kind of solve their own problems. And you do that by forcing the issue at the rim and getting your points either, with layups or high percentage shots or with free throws.
Robin, Anton Gill has come off the bench, and he's shot the ball really well, and Evan Taylor's probably shooting the ball better than he has in his entire college basketball career. Are those guys going to step up as big scoring options in these next 4 games, which are probably the toughest of any college basketball team's going to have to face?
Well, Nebraska sure hopes so, because they're going to need all the help they can get. I mean, when you're playing 4 straight ranked teams, including 2 of which on the road, that's extremely difficult for any team. I don't care who you are. If you're Duke, that's a tough challenge. And so for Nebraska, I mean, all these issues we've been talking about, they better get solved in a hurry here. Because if they try and win any of those games with a 5, 6, 7-minute scoring drought, they're going to learn a hard lesson. And so they're going to need everyone to be at their best offensively. And the good news is that they have guys that are playing much better. You know, Anton Gill, you know, people were charting him up as a bust last year before his injury because he was really fighting it and just didn't seem comfortable and, was really pressing to be the star player, and it never amounted to anything. And, he was basically a liability out there. But coming off that knee injury, there were a lot of questions of what type of player he was going to be, and he's really emerged as one of the biggest surprises, in my opinion, with how good he's looked. He's really been a dynamic player off the bench that has been that spark. And we talk about the starters having to carry the load. Anton has been one of those few bench guys that's really brought it consistently. And then Evan Taylor, like you mentioned, he's already got 8 made three-pointers on the year. He made 5 all of last season. So clearly he's put a ton of work into his game offensively over the offseason that's starting to show. So, they need all those guys. Not only the starting 5, you need Anton Gill. They need to get Isaiah Roby back. They need more production from guys like Jordy Shimanga. And so across the board, everyone needs to be at their best if they're going to have any chance of keeping their head above water over the next few weeks.
We're talking with Robin Washut of HuskerOnline.com, Matt Reynoldson, Scott Ayers, and Jake Bartecki here on the Spill Sports Show, talking a little bit about Husker basketball. And Robin, you've been around the country to a whole lot of AAU tournaments, so you've seen 5 stars in high school developing at every level, and there are very high expectations of Isaac Copeland, the 5-star transfer from Georgetown, coming in. And he's played very well these last few games, led the Huskers in scoring last night. Is Isaac Copeland starting to finally look like a 5-star?
He's certainly getting there. He was a guy that was an all Big East player as a freshman, so he clearly has that potential. Injuries and just kind of a bad fit in what Georgetown was doing under John Thompson III really kind of led to a big regression his sophomore year. And then, of course, the back injury that he tried to play through, it just never should have happened. And then he had back surgery and was essentially off for 10, 11 months without playing any basketball whatsoever. So, there's clearly some rust that he needed to work off. And another problem, he was trying to shoot his way back into a rhythm. And, that's not how you do it. You got to start your game inside and out when you're struggling. And he finally started to do that. I talked about being more aggressive. That's one of the things that he's been able to do to turn kind of his early season around is, he's not just settling for those 18-foot jump shots and three-pointers, which are a part of his game, but they're not his strength. So he's getting back into what his bread and butter is, and that's, that mid-range game, and then being active on the boards. He had 15 points and 8 rebounds last night. That's the type of, element that he brings when he's playing at his best. And so, a lot of people point to Glenn Watson as the biggest key in Nebraska's lineup, but I'd say maybe 1B would be Isaac Copeland, just because when he's playing at this level, he changes everything about the dynamic of Nebraska's lineup. So, the more he plays, the better he gets, and that's definitely been a good thing for Nebraska.
Well, he's shown an ability to be a streaky scorer, which has been kind of a microcosm of Nebraska's whole team. And going into these next 4 games, a brutal stretch at Michigan State, home against top 15 Minnesota, at Creighton, and then home against top 5 Kansas. You really look for Nebraska to be able to score the basketball. This team is really streaky. Do you see a game in the next 4 where that streakiness could really play to their benefit and maybe pull off an upset?
Well, you look at style of play. Obviously, Michigan State's going to be tough. Yes, Nebraska's had recent success against them, but they're the best team in the Big Ten, and it's really not even close. That's going to be a very difficult game. Nebraska's going to have to be almost perfect to win that one. And so next game on the list is Minnesota. that's maybe one of the best defensive teams in the conference, and they're about as physical as any team Nebraska is going to see all season. However, the fact that that's at home, and if they can catch Minnesota on a cold night shooting, I think that may be the best chance Nebraska has to win one of those four, which seems weird when you're talking about the number 12 team in the country. But I think that the likelihood of a potential, everything goes your way type game is probably its highest in that one. And then up next is Creighton. They're obviously a lot better than most people thought they were going to be. They're a high-paced, high-tempo offense that loves to get out and run, which that's kind of what Nebraska wants to do. And so do you necessarily want to try and get in a track meet with those guys on the road? I don't know. But then again, we've seen what happens when Nebraska tries to slow things down. Just look at the St. John's game. That did not work out well. So, it's one of those situations where they got to hope that for the first time ever, Creighton goes cold shooting at CenturyLink, and, Nebraska's able to, actually make a shot there. So I think there's the potential there for an upset, but I'm not betting on it. And then obviously you got Kansas to round it out. That's going to be a fun atmosphere. The Saturday night, the day of graduation, there's going to be a ton of Kansas fans there. It's going to be lively. And so maybe the PBA magic comes to effect there, but, again, I'm not holding my breath on that one. So if they can somehow find a way to steal one of these next four, that's a victory in itself. And I don't like their chances in any of them, but if I had to pick one, I would probably say Minnesota might be the most likely.
And that Kansas game on December 16th might be the liveliest atmosphere we've seen in PBA since that 2014 Wisconsin game when the Huskers effectively locked up their berth in the NCAA tournament, their most recent one. Robin Washington of HuskerOnline.com. Robin, thanks so much for joining us.
No problem, guys. Thanks for having me.
Coming up next, we'll talk a little bit of NBA and how the Cleveland Cavaliers have turned things around on the hardwood and are back to looking like an NBA Finals contender. All that and more, and the final rundown coming up next right here on the Spill Sports Show. Stay with us.
The risk of an American man developing cancer in his lifetime is a little less than 1 in 2. The risk of an American woman developing cancer in her lifetime is a little more than 1 in 3. But the death rates of cancer have been declining in men and women since the early 1990s.
I relay for the support of my sister.
I relay for the support of my grandfather.
I relay for the support of my uncle.
Keep helping those in need by participating in Relay for Life. Join us for Relay for Life at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln each year to fight back against cancer. Sign up for your community event or donate at relayforlife.org.
Water is all around us. No wonder it's hard to imagine we're facing a water crisis. But we are. So that's why the American Planning Association brings you simple ways to save water at home and in your community. Learn more at planning.org. That's planning.org. A public service message from this station and the American Planning Association.
What if you lived in a country where conflict in the streets killed 15 people each day and injured thousands each year? In the United States, there is conflict in our streets as drivers, pedestrians, and cyclists compete for safe space. Help end this deadly competition. Complete Streets have sidewalks, bike lanes, and narrower traffic lanes to provide safe space for everyone. To bring Complete Streets to your community, go to planning.org. That's planning.org. A message from this station and the American Planning Association.
Participating in on-campus activities is the best way to liven up your college experience. Student involvement is the vibrant hub of involvement on campus, connecting and serving the UNL community. Student involvement sponsors awesome events for students, including the Second Chance Cinema, guest speakers, and parties at the Union. Visit involved.unl.edu to find their upcoming event schedule, or follow them on Twitter at UNLinvolved and like them on Facebook to get updates right on your social stream. Don't sit around in your dorm all night. Let student involvement show you a good time.
The next Mayor Ritma Ross Media Arts Center's movie countdown has begun. UNL's Ross Media Center presents a variety of movies, videos, films, and documentaries. The Ross doesn't only offer you an alternative to commercial film and television fare, but also a time to sit back and enjoy the creative art of cinema. So take a break or go on a date at the Mary Ritma Ross Media Arts Center. For showtimes, visit the Ross Media Arts Center's website, theross.org. That's theross.org.
Back here for the final 20-ish minutes of the Spill Sports Show. Matt Reynoldson, Scott Ayers, Jake Bartecki has been our co-host for today in place of David Eicholt, who has been at the chiropractor, as we talk a little bit of NBA in honor of David Eicholt, as Cleveland and LeBron James have won 9 straight games and certainly are back to looking like a finals contender. As soon as everybody was doubting LeBron James, he just gets that little bit of fuel and drives this team further. It's just so impressive year in and year out, and LeBron's 15th year in the league to still be the best player is unreal.
I mean, he could win the MVP every single season if the NBA community wanted to give it to him, because he is the best player in the NBA. And what the Cavs have been able to do on this 9-game win streak is just incredible. Already up to 3rd in the East behind Detroit and Boston. And I think this makes things more interesting when Boston and Cleveland play each other next. Of course, Gordon Hayward suffering that gruesome injury, but all hail the king, because LeBron James, once again, putting his team in the mixture.
LeBron is one of the best players of all time. I think Michael Jordan's probably the best player of all time, but LeBron, just how he's gotten them winning now, just proves that he's one of the best of all time. Now, this 9-game winning streak, I feel like this is going to start to slow down, because they've got there's a few injuries on here. Tristan Thompson's out. IT is still out. Iman Shumpert's day-to-day, and J.R. Smith is day-to-day. So a couple of really key players on that team are injured. But, LeBron has been the reason that they've won 9 straight. It hasn't been IT. It hasn't been J.R. Smith. It's been LeBron James. And LeBron James is – I have as much faith in LeBron James as I do in anyone in the NBA. So I think they can keep on winning, but I think it's going to slow down. I think the margin of win spread, like in terms of point spreading, is going to get slimmer. And it's a big part of that. A big part of those wins has been the improved defense and a role player certainly learning how to play his role very effectively, and that's Jake Crowder. Acquired in the trade from Boston, one of the best defenders, one of the best small forward, power forward defenders in the NBA. He's got a big, strong frame, and he has been defending very well. Has played in all 21 games, averaging 25 minutes a game, and just 8.5 points per game, but he's really making his impact felt on the defensive end and taking a lot of that defensive pressure off of LeBron, who we know can guard all 5 positions, but Jake Crowder, a similarly versatile defender.
He is, and, during this run for the Cavs, they've played decent opponents, but, and their biggest win, of course, is actually against Detroit. It was a massive win, and I think that's why you have to look at this streak and be impressed by it, but I can't wait to see them when they go hand-in-hand with some of the top teams, because early on in the season you saw those losses against the Rockets, against even teams like the Nets and the Pelicans. But, I mean, their starting 5 have really stepped up, and Jay Crowder is one of those guys, Matt. You mentioned tremendous defensive player, but you also have to look at Boston and what they got in that trade, and, of course, Kyrie Irving. He has been fantastic for the Boston Celtics.
Absolutely. Yeah. Boston is one of the top teams in the East, along with Detroit and Cleveland. It's been very impressive to watch these teams this year, and this Eastern Conference is absolutely loaded right now. Very fun to watch. Boston sitting at 18-4. You got Toronto at 13-7, Detroit at 14-6, Cleveland at 14-7, and then other teams in the mix. Philadelphia, the process really coming through in Philly. The 76ers, Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons. They obviously felt the full wrath of LeBron James the other night, but the process is certainly coming through. So very entertaining East shaping up this year, Jake.
Yeah, the Eastern Conference is much better, and a couple of teams in here that I did not expect to be as good. I did not see the Milwaukee Bucks, and I didn't see Giannis being as strong as he's been this season. And, early on, he was expected to be an MVP candidate. But, Kyrie Irving, I did not think that Boston team was going to be as good as they were, especially without Gordon Hayward, and that just horrifying injury that he had. I didn't expect the Pistons to be number 2 and 14-6 and only 3 games back. The Pacers, and of course the Sixers. The Eastern Conference, you've looked back at recent years and you see, okay, Miami, Atlanta, Chicago, all those teams being in the playoffs. Those teams are now in rebuilding mode, especially the Bulls. And So this opens the door for other teams to come in, like the Sixers and like the Bucks and the Wizards and all those different teams. So it's an interesting Eastern Conference. It's different than it's been in prior years.
Well, Jake, I want to get your thoughts on this. As a Chicago native, the Bulls absolutely tanking 3-18 right now. What's going on in Chicago, and is it just going to be that kind of a long year for all the Chicago sports, maybe outside of baseball and hockey?
Yeah,
The two main Chicago sports, football and basketball.
I mean, I'm a Packers fan, so I'm fine with the Bears, whatever they do. But, yeah, the Bulls are atrocious. And I'm sorry, I do not like their owner, Jerry Reinsdorf. He screwed up the White Sox. He screwed up the Bulls. And I'll tell you what, I mean, if this is rebuilding, I hope they're better. I hope they double their win total next year. And I think that I would not be surprised if the Bulls only had 10 or 15 wins this year. And I'm saying
not hard to double 10 or 15.
No, from 10 to 20. So, man, I honestly don't know what to make of it. It's a mess. Everything with Bobby Portis and Nikola Mirotic at the beginning of the year. I think some of the trades they made in the offseason were unfair. I thought the deal with Jimmy Butler was not a good deal. I think they could have gotten much more out of that. I think they could have looked to other teams that had more talent to give away. So I put this on Jerry Reinsdorf, and I really hope he gets this figured out because it's a joke.
And a big loss to the Suns came on Tuesday night, which I know better than anybody is a very embarrassing loss as a big Suns fan. They're now 8-15 and on their way to an NBA title in 30 years.
At least one team's at least one of our teams has actually got 8 wins and not 3.
Oh, did someone say the Denver Nuggets?
The Denver Nuggets. Scott, here's your soapbox. Talk about the Denver Nuggets.
Oh, guys. Well, Mason Plumlee just recently said the Nuggets 6th in the West right now, said there's no leadership right now on the Denver Nuggets, but I still believe they've got a lot of young talent in Gary Harris, Jamal Murray, and Nikola Jokic, those 3 superstars. Well, I can't say superstars, but 3 stars in the making, and I think they've got a lot of young talent. The problem is, like Plumlee said, leadership hasn't been there. They'll come off, like just recently, they were coming off a 3-day, where they didn't play at all. 3 days of rest, excuse me. Wow, that was terrible. And just got absolutely blown out. Just wasn't even close. And so people look to Malone, but they also look to, there's real no leadership except for maybe Wilson Chandler.
Why is Miles Plumlee, of all people, saying that there's no leadership in the Denver Nuggets locker room?
I don't know, but I absolutely love it.
Just players that don't play. I mean, Miles Plumlee plays, but I just want to see like the 12th guy on the bench be like, the ownership sucks.
There's nothing better. Oh, no, excuse me. It was Mason, not Miles.
Oh, it was Mason Plumlee, so
yeah,
worse.
The brother who plays.
No, Miles plays. Mason barely. I don't know.
Yeah, no, Mason, he's getting 18 minutes a game.
That's good that you classify your team's players as the guys who play in the game.
I don't know. They're both Duke guys. Everybody went to Duke.
They're Duke guys. Everybody went to
Duke or Kentucky. Phoenix is full of Kentucky guys. It's just I just want to see the 12th guy on the bench just say the ownership sucks.
It's about time we see Glenn Watson on that bench, huh?
Tanner Lee on that NBA bench. We've been talking about it all year. He's a second-round NBA draft pick. Got that good frame at 6'4".
T. Lee getting backed down by Paul Millsap. Just
ouch.
Scott, I know you've been thinking about this for quite a long time. Well, last night it was quite an entertaining matchup between the Golden State Warriors and the Los Angeles Lakers. Golden State ended up pulling that one out in overtime, but Lonzo Ball certainly showed some things in his first matchup with the Warriors. Jake, 10 assists, 15 points, nothing to scoff about.
Yeah, I mean, they looked good. I think the Warriors especially, I think they've come back. They've turned in – they didn't look as good as people expected early on in the season, but I still think they're probably my pick to win the championship. I mean, with the big 3 out there and kind of a super team now, I just think they're better, and I think Lonzo Ball he's not. I don't see him turning around. He's either a triple-double or he's going to score 6 points.
Yeah. Scott?
Yeah, I'm still not sold on the old Lonzo Ball project yet. I think he has a lot of potential, but the best rookie right now is Ben Simmons.
Are you telling me you don't have faith in the big baller brand?
Nah, not quite, but
David will come and punch you.
Oh, I know. He's probably on his way from the chiropractor to take me out.
He's limping over here.
Yeah, that's what he's doing. He's limping over here right now because I said I don't believe in Lonzo.
Do you believe in LiAngelo or LaMelo?
Definitely LiAngelo. That dude, steals per game, out of this world.
Well, Lonzo Ball certainly making an impact against the best team in the league, defending champion Golden State Warriors, taking them to overtime. Lakers just not able to get the job done. Boys, do you have a rant prepared?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yes, I sure do.
Here we go.
It's the final rundown.
Welcome into the final segment of the Spill Sports Show here on a Thursday afternoon into evening, your drive time sports talk entertainment. Matt Reynoldson, Scott Ayers, Jake Bartecki. It is crunch time and things are about to get heated as each host has a 30-second rant on each topic and the other hosts each get a 30-second rebuttal on each subject. Crunch time. Are you ready to go? Scott, do you have a rant?
You better believe I do. And guys, we're going to go back to the AFC West where
And the future.
Where the Los Angeles Chargers,
San Diego Chargers.
I just want to say San Diego so badly, are going to win the AFC West. Phillip Rivers and company are already feeling it. They're hot right now. And, guys, I say this because Kansas City on a 3-game losing streak, the Broncos are miserable, and the Raiders just simply can't get things done right now. Phillip Rivers is feeling good coming off that primetime win against Dallas on Thanksgiving. I see the Chargers shocking the playoff community and making the playoffs.
I think they're going to win all of them except for the game at Kansas City, but I'm telling you what, that division is terrible. And I'm telling you now, Scott, they're going to get into the playoffs, and they're going to get dominated by whoever they play.
Yeah, there's no way Los Angeles wins that division. This is the worst take on
they
this
win
show.
They win their three. They win all the games that they have left except at Kansas City, and then they get smoked in the playoffs.
That is the worst.
I believe.
Scott, that is the worst take on this show.
I believe in it, too. It could happen. Phillip Rivers have a career year.
That's the worst take on this show since David said RG3 was better than Andrew.
I couldn't believe that.
No, and he's reiterated that several times. No, LA does not have the horses to win. I mean, they got the quarterback and wide receivers, but where's the defense? That defense doesn't hold up down the stretch, and they play too many close games. They're not going to win all of these close games. It just doesn't happen in the NFL, and they're not a good enough team to force the issue. The LA Chargers don't win that division. I think it's Kansas City's to lose, or Oakland turns things around and gets that set up. Jake, you're on the clock.
All right, my rant is about the Chicago Blackhawks and Jonathan Toews. Jonathan Toews has been playing at a terrible level this season. He's only a +4 on the season. He's got a good number of 16 points, but that's nothing compared to what Patrick Kane has at 25. And I'm telling you now, Jonathan Toews is on his way out. This is a younger hockey team. This is a younger NHL. You look at the guys who are up there in points. Alex DeBrincat, his rookie season, 18 points, a hat trick, 2 assists the other night. And against the Ducks, John Hayden, John Rutta, Brandon Saad, Nick Schmaltz, all guys on the Blackhawks that are younger, playing better. Brent Seabrook, another one, on his way out. He's only a +4, doesn't have a ton of shots on goal, hasn't been passing the puck very well. This is a younger hockey team and a younger NHL. You look at guys like Austin Matthews, Connor McDavid, Jack Eichel, Artemi Panarin, and all these younger players in the NHL. Jonathan Toews is getting up there in age, and this is a younger hockey team.
You know, I'm going to have to disagree with that about Jonathan Toews being the central point of this team. I think this is Patrick Kane's team. And while Jonathan Toews, I agree with you.
Jonathan Toews is the leader of this team, though.
He does need to play better, but I think this is Patrick Kane's team, and Patrick Kane has proved that with his play this year. I think the big detriment this year is you got to look in the plus-minus column. And right now, Duncan Keith is failing the Blackhawks with a -5 plus-minus. He's been so good throughout his time in the league, and he's just struggling right now this season with the Blackhawks. I get it. Early in the season, a long way till June and the Stanley Cup playoffs, but the Blackhawks have got to figure it out between their 3 stars.
Well, go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, and this is a Chicago team that in the past few playoff runs have struggled, right? They're getting eliminated left and right, and so maybe it's time to out the old, in with the new here in Chicago. I'm not sure. This is, they win a couple Stanley Cups just a few years ago, but really haven't proven themselves since. I think they were bumped out of the first round or second round last year and the year before that, and so they're still a team with talent, and I think it's Patrick Kane's team, but they need to look forward to the future as well.
Well, and my thing with Duncan Keith, I understand he's a -5, but he's up there. He's in the top 5 in terms of defensive points this season. He's got 13 points. He's racking up a lot of assists, and all those 13 points are from assists. The thing is,
he's not doing
defense.
well in transition right now.
Well, and that's the thing. You look at some of these other offensive defensemen in the NHL, Drew Doughty, PK Subban, Erik Karlsson, Roman Josi in Nashville. These guys are offensive defensemen, and that's not what Duncan Keith has done in prior years. Maybe Quenneville's trying to change up his play style a bit, but you're right. A -5 is not great. He is shooting the puck though, and he's setting up guys for goals, but he needs to be defending better. And I think they're missing some of their shot blocking without having Nicholas Hjalmarsson anymore.
Matt, you're on the clock.
Lane Kiffin needs to have a job in the Power 5. His Twitter game is off the charts right now. Tweeted a picture of Kim Jong-un turning down the Tennessee head coaching job. That on the heels of some nuclear tests by North Korea. This coach does not give a flying fladoodle right now. He is the most entertaining coach in college football. And don't look twice, but Florida Atlantic is dominating the Conference USA right now. He jumped from Tennessee to USC and failed at USC like so many other coaches after Pete Carroll have. He got fired at USC and then became the offensive coordinator at Alabama. It's been a weird backwards career path for Lane Kiffin, but I think it's time for Lane to get back in Power 5 at none other than the place where a sewage center was named after him, Knoxville, Tennessee, whose fans he has been ruthlessly trolling to this point.
Yikes. Lane Kiffin. You know what? Maybe not seeing him as a Division I coach, but that man needs a job with a social media team somewhere because he has been fantastic. Just ruthless. He's weird, and I love it. I love how weird Lane Kiffin is. I'd love to see him, take the job over Scott Frost here at Nebraska.
I like Lane Kiffin, but he tweets like he's a college student. And don't get me wrong, we're college students, but the thing is his Twitter game is making him look really unprofessional. And I'm sorry, but I think he's a good coach, but I think the Twitter game is a little too much right now, and I don't think he's getting a job anything above Florida Atlantic if he keeps that up.
# come to the FAU. Well, that'll do it for us here on another edition of the Spill Sports Show. We'd like to thank our guest, Robin Washut of HuskerOnline.com, for joining us today in the second hour. You can check out our podcast on the SpillKRNU.wordpress.com. I'm Matt Reynoldson. For Scott Ayers and Jake Bartecki, have a great night and drive safe out there.
The Spill Sports Show with Matt Reynoldson, David Eichholt, and Scott Ayers. Never miss a show again. Check out our podcast at thespillkrnu.wordpress.com.
The 76ers could have drastically improved their organization by drafting Walter Pitchford.
Quite frankly, if he wins a Super Bowl, I'll direct it 30 for 30 on it.
I've watched this kid play multiple times on national television.
You like watching kids, David?
Dude, I love basketball. Excuse me.
The Spill Sports Show. Thursday drive time from 3 to 5 on KRNU.